Hi everybody, my name is Paul. If you're watching this, you've probably arrived at echomigrants.com. It's a website I've been working on for a while. I want to talk today a little bit about numbers and the difficulties with numbers. And I guess the big piece is not to get too hung up on exact numbers. Numbers are difficult. All right, so different categories. First off, big numbers. I really don't think we can understand some of the big numbers that we're talking about here. Millions and billions and trillions, right? In terms, like when we get to there, we get to talking about, the amount of carbon dioxide or the amount of money or the amount of debt or something like that. I think these numbers are really just too big for our brains to really comprehend. Let me give you an example. 1,000,000 seconds, that's about 11 days. Okay, I can kind of imagine what 11 days is, obviously. 1,000,000,000 seconds, that's 31 years. That's a little less than half of my life. 1,000,000,000,000 seconds, that's 32,000 years. I don't know what that, it's something to do with, prehistory and archaeology and 30,000 years, yikes. Small numbers are kind of the same also. There's incredibly profound differences, that we can have in really small numbers. Poisons are a great example. There's tiny, tiny little amounts of poison, toxic chemicals or pollution or microplastics or something like that. We're awash in all of these pollutants, pesticides and medical compounds and so forth. And they're like impossible to measure inside of us. We know they're having some big effects on us, but it's really hard to get a hold of what they're doing, how much, what the pathways are. I want to talk about global numbers. Global numbers are really hard to gather, okay? There's 200 nations in the world, thousands of industries, millions of businesses, 8 billion people. Many places are not very organized. A lot of the places, the numbers that we may be interested in, they're just not collected, or there's differences in the way they're measured. The units are different. A lot of times, a lot of these numbers that we're most interested in these days, they're changing really quickly. And then, of course, there are vested interests in some of the, political or corporate interests that really don't want the numbers collected. So for all these different reasons, again, exact numbers are not the most important thing. Next category, exotic patterns. There's interactions, conclusions, trends, analyses. A lot of these are based on very, very sophisticated models and projections. And honestly, they're really only truly understood by really very highly specialized people. Not even just smart people, but people who are very specialized in one discipline or another. Scientists, engineers, accountants. And then on top of that, they're largely dependent on whatever initial assumptions they're made, and they all have margins of error and so forth. Another category is linear versus, let's say, exponential changes or tipping points. We've been tracking numbers for a long time. We're really good at it. It's probably one of our superpowers, is to remember things that have happened. We invented language, and so we can talk about the things that have happened. And a lot of relationships have some kind of a linear relationship, right? Like it's always, it's always been about this much, or it moves like this, or it moves like that, right? And we can make really good predictions about the future based on how things have gone in the past. However, in our human history recently, in the last 20 generations, a lot of these numbers have just gone exponential, okay? Our population is a classic case of this, okay? We were 500 million people, a few hundred million, 500 million people for thousands and thousands of generations. And then 20 generations ago, boom, went like that, okay? We exploded. Same with all of our resource use and so forth. A tipping point, that's a big deal in a lot of the projections of some of the crises we face. Tipping points are spoken about a lot in climate. Tipping point is just pretty much what it sounds like. It's the classic example is something is standing up, it's balanced, and you tip it a little bit, it's still okay, it's still okay, it's still okay, it's still okay. At some point, it falls. That might not just be falling down, it may be a tipping point this way. The idea of it's a general term that talks about how things hit these critical levels sometimes that are very hard for us to see, a lot of times because a lot of this is new. I mean, our population hits some tipping point. There's a lot of interest in climate tipping points, for instance, for the ocean currents or the permafrost melting up at the higher latitudes. Next category would be the presentations of numbers. We make different stories, they're presented in different ways. The extinction rates, the ecocides, the biodiversity loss, that's a good example as far as I'm concerned. Sometimes you look at a story and they may be talking about the percentage of animals that are gone extinct or are threatened, or it might be the biomass. That's like if you took all the animals and weighed them. Or another article might talk about the number of species, right? So you don't know if they're talking about the absolute number or the weight or the number of species, right? There's 3 different averages: mean, medium, and mode. And so again, it can be really difficult to compare stories because they might, there's a different presentation. Another category is just complexity. Like a lot of these things, there's so many different things happening now and on a grand scale, and they're interacting with each other. And it's difficult for us to think widely enough. A lot of these trends or patterns, they overlap or they reinforce each other, or they negate each other. And so if you're looking at one area, for instance, infrastructure, let's say, we have a backlog of maintenance on our infrastructure, and maybe there's an estimate, we're $50 trillion behind, but in another area, money is so expensive now to get because of the debt that what might have looked like having a price tag of $1 billion to do something, whatever, it's really not. It's like $1 billion, 1.1, just because the money is expensive. That's one example of how things can interact and change the numbers of the individual categories. Somewhat finally, no, not even. I'm working off the notes here. The size of the effects, this kind of goes back to some of the big numbers I was talking about at the beginning. We're pushing things globally. There's so many of us. And what we're doing now is so completely unprecedented. For all of our history, like thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of generations, okay? Whatever we did only affected the things just right around us, okay? If we used a rock or we grew something or, we did something in the area right around us, when we were finished, the earth just sort of filled in around it, and when we came back the next season or a few seasons later, there wouldn't be any indication. If we had any trash, they would just fill in our trash and move it back into the biosphere somehow. But that's no longer the way now. There's so many of us, and we're using so much stuff that we're changing things on a global pattern. What's important with all of these is not remembering the exact numbers. What's most important is to understand the overall concepts and the trends and the patterns. And this takes a lot of time. to study and to understand it. You know, a lot of these stories, they're somewhat hidden and they can be difficult to communicate. And the concept that I think is most important is what some people call directional accuracy. Okay, is, you know, what direction is something going in, and how fast is it going in that direction, and let's say how many other things it is affecting while it goes in that direction. That's the big deal, and that's one of the purposes of the website. Is that it's a place where you can go and you can dig into the details if you're interested. It's all labeled and sorted, right? So you can browse to your own interest, and you can dig in and you know, dig down into whatever complexity or whatever the stories that you're most interested in.